Conor McGregor has been making his name in the UFC fights since his debut in 2013. But what McGregor does that's insane is that he pushes himself by competing in different weight classes and absolutely dominates in them. He's a force in the octagon and nothing holds him back. In today's video, we'll be talking about Conor McGregor's greatest wins at different classes. Let's get into it. First off, McGregor's insane transformations at different weight classes. The legendary fighter has taken a round of a few weight classes in the UFC. You'd think that he'd failed in at least one of them, but nope, he did brilliantly in every one of them. His UFC debut was in 2013 against Marcus Brimage. He started competing in the featherweight bout first. The UFC's featherweight division forces the competitors to be within 136 to 145 pounds, which is about 65.8 kilograms. The Irishman had some memorable victories in this division that we'll get to in a bit. Then he went and competed in the lightweight division of the UFC. Now, this division limits the fighters to 146 to 155 pounds, which is 66 to 70 kilograms. It stands between the featherweight and welterweight divisions. When speaking of this division in 2014, he stated that he likes this division the best. He recalls being fast and refreshed when fighting at lightweight, and that it's fighting at featherweight. He's a former double champion in featherweight and lightweight, which makes him the first UFC fighter to hold the championships simultaneously in two different weight classes. The welterweight division didn't scare him though. It's of the group that weighs between 156 to 170 pounds, which is 71 to 77 kilograms. This has been his unluckiest division as of yet. An example of it would be UFC 196. Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor went head-to-head, but the latter ended up in a rear naked choke, which led to his loss. Don't worry, he won the next time. Following up, let's talk about some of his best upsets in the different weight classes. Starting with Marcus Brimage versus Conor McGregor at number 7. Let's take a trip back to McGregor's first big fight in the UFC. In April of 2013, UFC on Fuel 9 took place, and in the undercard was the Irishman. He was 24 at the time and stood at 145 pounds. His debut was in the featherweight bout in the UFC, but his MMA record was 12-2. The fight started with Brimage taking the lead and landing solid punches. He came out fast, throwing punches, while the debutant tried to find a spinning hook kick. Conor soon landed a hard shot and a hard front kick. The commentators foreshadowed that it could be an early knockout since the punch landed pretty hard. Brimage took another hit and got stung by the shots. Conor landed some good heavy shots consecutively, dropping his competitor. This led to him punching the absolute crap out of Brimage a minute and 7 seconds into the first round, where Brimage was split open and done for. The 24-year-old at the time had set the record straight by announcing himself as a new threat to the UFC world. He won by TKO punches. He stunned everyone with a glorious and brutal victory, which marked the first of many victories for him. Moving on to number 6, Chad Mendes was defeated in the interim title fight for the belt. In the same division, the Notorious didn't lose the next several fights after Brimage. This fight took place in the UFC 189 in July 2015. It's an important one to note because this fight marked the first time that McGregor held a UFC title. He was at 145 pounds and had an MMA record of 17-2. The first round started with the pair going at each other with a combination of various punches. Giving credit where it's due is important for this fight. Mendes wasn't the original competitor. The previous one had dropped, and he'd picked this fight late, hoping to stop the hype trail that followed the Irishman. He did an incredible job pinning McGregor to the ground multiple times and making him bleed. Yes, folks, McGregor was bleeding right from the first round, and he was on the ground for the majority of the second. But fate was on his side because a couple of powerful punches had him off the ground and back on their legs. This is where McGregor took advantage of his opponent's weakness and landed a few good punches that threw Mendes on the ground. This was McGregor's first real threat, as his opponent was a serious threat. This win had the interim featherweight title in his hands, and it set the course for the long-awaited showdown with Jose Aldo. Not to mention at number 5, the legendary fight with Jose Aldo. Society talks a lot about how long men last behind closed doors, but that's boring. We have to talk about how long men last in the ring, and this particular incident is a perfect case study. UFC 194 was when the Irishman faced the toughest test of his entire career. He was facing the reigning featherweight king, Jose Aldo, in a highly anticipated fight in December 2015. Aldo hadn't lost in over a decade, and what we're about to tell you, all you need to know is that it's set history. Here's how it went. The first round had started. Aldo came out to throw a massive left hook, but little did he know that all his fame was about to be shattered in one big sweep. The Notorious countered with a perfect left that sent Aldo shattering on the ground, crumbled. The almighty champion had fallen with the first punch thrown by his competitor. He took down Aldo in 13 seconds of the first round with his first punch and his first attempt at the title. The silence of the doubters and the screams of the crowd was deafening. He came in and swooped away his dream title. And what's better is that he secured the fastest finish in UFC Championship history with this victory. It's yet to be broken. Next up at number 4, we've got his iconic fight with Cerrone. For this fight, we're well into 2020. His MMA record was 21-4, and he weighed 170 pounds in this welterweight division. He walked in the octagon with his hair slicked back and a winner's attitude, and he wasn't misled. McGregor had faced a pretty devastating loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov and took 15 months off. He returned to this very fight. It's what he needed to remind the world that a single loss doesn't dictate his career, and he's still the Notorious. At this stage, he was determined to win whatever he could. Even a hard-fought decision would suffice and be enough for him to reassert himself as one of the greatest fighters of all time. And boy, oh boy, he came ready. It took him just 40 seconds to crush every single doubt that anyone could have in their head. He overwhelmed the cowboy with a few strikes before putting the fight to bed. This proved that he was still an elite fighter despite a loss and his inactivity. He silenced the haters again and gave way for his fan base to wake up once more and scream for their favorite fighter. Coming up at number 3, McGregor took the lightweight title from Alvarez. Remember when we told you that McGregor was the first to be a champion in 2 divisions? Well, this fight was the one that set the record. This performance was the one that set McGregor at the top and put him in the books. The Irishman stood as the featherweight champion and announced that he'd be going after the lightweight title as well. Now listen, it sounds crazy now even though it has happened. Imagine the fans at the time. They thought he was insane. Very few thought he'd be able to win. The Notorious gave his performance of a lifetime in the UFC's long-awaited debut at Madison Square Garden in UFC 205. In November 2016, he fought passionately with Alvarez, and if we're being for real, Alvarez was dominated from start to finish. The Dublin-born showed off his wide array of techniques and tools in the stand-up department. It was a masterclass to witness with one combination for everyone to see after another. Alvarez didn't stand a chance. After a good bout, his opponent was dropped in the second round for good, and this made McGregor the first simultaneous 2-division champion in UFC history. Looking back at it, this was his peak. He'd never displayed such a clean performance against a man of such high caliber. This victory put him over the top once more. Moving on to number 2, welterweight Nate Diaz held McGregor down pretty well. While McGregor dominated the other 2 divisions, he's in no way alien to the welterweight division. He's fought thrice in it during his UFC career and won twice. His first fight as a UFC welterweight broke another record. It ended up being one of the UFC's biggest pay-per-views in history. The Irishman lost the bout in the second round via submission due to a rear naked choke. It was a bloodbath and was his first loss in the UFC. They both met again in the same division in UFC 202 rematch, with McGregor winning the contest by a majority decision. This fight was UFC's second highest grossing event, bringing in $90 million from 1.65 million pay-per-view buys. His last fight in this division was with Donald Cerrone, which we talked about. Finally, let's end at number 1 with Dustin Poirier and his matches with McGregor. The first fight took place in UFC 178, where Conor was number 9 ranked and Dustin was at number 5. At this stage, McGregor was winning back-to-back fights, but Poirier wasn't far behind with wins of his own. The Irish secured his easy win by TKO in the first round at 1 minute and 46 seconds. Since then, Dustin is the only one to have 2 victories over the biggest star in the history of MMA. Although one of his wins is a TKO by doctor's stoppage at 5 minutes of the first round because the Notorious's leg was hurt and he was taken out on a stretcher, it's still highly debated whether this counts as a win or not, but so far the record says that Dustin won. McGregor had one against him in the featherweight but couldn't win in the lightweight bouts. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think of McGregor's fights in different weight classes? Which one of his fights has been your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you at the next one.